Hello and welcome to VistaTalks, interesting discussions with interesting people from all around the world. I'm your host for today, Priscillia Charless, and I'm joined today in Studio 2 for a very special episode by Siobhan Gantly. Siobhan is Chief Human Resources Officer at Vistatec. You're very welcome, Siobhan. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Priscillia. I'm a big fan of VistaTalks, so it's my pleasure to be here today.
Thank you so much. So let's move on and get on to the show. Siobhan, we're delighted to have you on the show today. And as the Chief Human Resources Officer at Vistatec, you're engaged obviously in a lot of different areas. So can you tell us a little bit about your role and your journey with Vistatec first?
Sure. So I started my Vistatec journey 19 years ago now, so it's a long time. Vistatec was just a startup, really. I think the company was about 3 years old at the time, and a very different company, obviously, to the one that exists today. In terms of my role, I'm part of the executive management team and would be responsible for human resources globally. So today we have teams in 25 countries worldwide, and when I started way back when, it was just 2 countries.
Wow, so, what a journey.
It's been an incredible journey, it really has. And not just watching Vistatec grow, but as well the people who have made Vistatec as well. It's been amazing, watching people succeed. And look, in general, it's a wonderful industry to be part of. From a HR perspective, I think people are at the core of every aspect of what we do. So I have to say, I love what I do.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I suppose with people from all around the world, there's so many different challenges involved, I suppose, with whether it's time zones or on so many different levels. It must be really interesting. So thanks for sharing that with us. Now, I'd like to talk about Vistatec a little bit more and the changes that you've seen. So we're, as many of us, unfortunately, going through a global health crisis at the moment. And I'd like to talk a little bit about this in depth. This is a special episode, and we hope that our audience can find, information and find this episode helpful. We would like to talk about how Vistatec has been dealing with the situation, the crisis, and what changes the company has implemented given this crisis.
Sure. Well, look, from the very beginning, COVID-19 got our attention. Vistatec has a global footprint that we are very proud of, obviously, but we are very reliant on. So, with employees, contractors, suppliers, and clients really in every corner of the world, we knew a global pandemic posed a serious risk. So I guess back in January when the WHO started to talk about a pandemic, and there was a lot of information coming out about what was happening in China, and that we set up a task force back then to help us assess the risk, I suppose, and put every strategy in place that we could to minimize the risk to us. And we looked really closely at all of the different possible scenarios that could happen. We did identify that, I guess, our HQ in Dublin was where we were most vulnerable to a potential outbreak. And we also knew that, I suppose, business and personal travel would also pose a certain risk to our business. So fairly soon, we put unprecedented measures in place really around business and personal travel for our teams, I suppose, to help us manage that risk. We also knew that working from home was going to be critical, I guess, in terms of keeping our staff and their families safe, and at the same time, of course, keeping our business protected. And look, as a business, we were very fortunate insofar as we already had a formidable kind of remote IT infrastructure. We already had a lot of teams working remotely, so the transition to remote working was I would say fairly seamless, and again that meant that our teams could remain focused on our customers and supporting them through the crisis, I guess.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. That is really important, I suppose, yes, in such a scenario, really, if I may say, which has become an unfortunate reality for many of us. But thanks for sharing all those, not just initiatives, but really measures put in place by the company. So now, with the situation, obviously, still being a reality, can you tell us about how Vistatec is, what Vistatec is doing to remain proactive, considering the fact that, for many of us, it's still quite an uncertain time and we're looking at the future, but we're also trying to remain proactive. So can you tell us, share some of the initiatives that the company has implemented and is looking to put in place?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, look, at a very basic level, I would say that we have been very honest and transparent at every stage of this process with
Yes.
our teams. We shared our assessments of the situation from early on and the plans that we had in place for how we would handle, I guess, the various scenarios or possibilities. We also acknowledged the individual concerns of our employees as well, who like everyone else, they were worried from a personal perspective about what was going on in the world around them. And I think we showed as well that we were not willing to compromise on the safety of our people
Of
by
course.
making difficult decisions early. So each time the situation as well escalated, people were calm and in control because we had kind of talked them through those scenarios.
Yeah.
So I think that was really important. Our IT teams have been so proactive in terms of making sure that everyone has what they need to work from home. They put together test plans, training sessions, easy to understand self-help guides. They purchased contingency equipment, so they really had every eventuality prepared for. And as I mentioned earlier, I do think that transition to everybody working remotely was very seamless. Our recruitment and onboarding team, together with the various hiring managers, have had plenty of experience, I guess, already with remote onboarding programs. So
Yes.
this made it very easy for us to continue meeting our hiring targets and to ensure that, all of our teams had the capacity needed to support our clients, again, just during such a busy time for them and to be able to support them. Our marketing team engaged with our customers and suppliers and provided much of the information needed to those companies who rely on us every day. They've also been working on practical initiatives to keep us all socially connected in our new environments. We're running virtual coffee breaks every day to help people connect, I suppose, while working remotely. We've also running these what we're calling Stronger Together sessions to encourage people to come together and discuss relevant topics, I guess, and share each other's experiences. I know some of our well-established remote teams who would understand the challenges that come with working from home for the first time, came with ideas as well and advice for those who were new to this world of working from home. Parents have been sharing information in terms of how to help with challenges of homeschooling
Of
and
course, yeah.
working. And I have to say, I really have been overwhelmed by the genuine acts of kindness I've seen, from people to each other. Our teams in Italy, during the most difficult of days, have made videos to encourage their colleagues elsewhere in the world to heed the advice and stay positive. Really such selfless acts in very difficult circumstances for them. One of our partners actually in China offered to send us a shipment of PPE that they no longer needed, which again, such kind acts, in when there was a whole lot of sadness and loss, I suppose, that this pandemic has brought about. The one thing that has really kind of amazed me, I think, is just seeing people come together, and it really has been evident in Vistatec. It's been an epic team effort, with all the stakeholders,
Yeah.
employees, contractors, our suppliers, our customers. Really, it's been amazing.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely amazing to hear, especially yeah, in the current situation. So thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. Now we're talking about staff located in different parts of the world. Are you seeing any areas being impacted at different times, like with in countries, governments dealing with the situation differently? How do you manage this from a global perspective?
Yeah, this is a good question. It's a very unprecedented situation,
Mhm.
and I think seeing how the countries with the earlier outbreaks have reacted has of course been a huge advantage. I think to those that are impacted a little bit
Yeah.
afterwards, and I think we've benefited from that experience for sure. But as you said, Vistatec is a very global organization, and that's something that we were acutely aware of.
Mhm.
So we didn't wait for individual governments to act, and I think it's fair to say we were a little bit ahead of the curve, maybe in some respects. And when we did act, it was unilateral. It was across all locations. Borders really have no bearing, I think, on the vulnerability to
Sure.
COVID-19. So, a unilateral approach made most sense to us when we were looking at this, as a company operating in 25 different countries across the globe. I think it's true that Ireland is where we are exposed most, and while we're still in the middle of this battle against COVID-19, I do have to compliment the leadership this Irish government has shown to date, because I do think they acted in the best interest of the people at
Mhm.
all times. And I think the difficult decisions that maybe other governments put off, they
Yeah.
took exactly when needed. And we'd have had access to very reliable information as well. And look, this has been a huge benefit to companies like us, and will certainly aid, I think, a quick recovery.
Thank you so much. Now, from a HR perspective, what would you say? Like, how can global organizations such as VistaTech remain on point with the messaging that they're sending out? So, obviously, you've been involved in so many different areas, and that implies, communicating with, our clients, our staff. So, what would you say from a HR point of view?
Yeah, look, I think all organizations need to be very conscious of the information that they publish. There's so much information out there, and I think there's a real risk of kind of COVID-19 information fatigue as
Mhm.
well. And it is a well-known fact that too much negative information does have a lasting impact on people. And I'm acutely aware of that, I guess, when it comes to our own employees. We asked teams actually for our last all hands meeting to set the agenda, because we wanted to ensure that we were covering practical topics that people were interested in. And it was made clear to us that people wanted reassurance, with all of this going on. So that really has been our focus, throughout all of this. And I do think companies like Vistatech have a role to play in quelling that fear, and not adding to it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this. Yeah, we're talking about, yeah, it's interesting. You're talking about the role that our company has. Now, many organizations of different sizes are going through this unprecedented time. Wow, how important it is for organization to help, other like governments and nonprofit organizations, charities, whether it's in the localization industries or not.
Yeah, well, look, I think corporate social responsibility is certainly something I and Vistatech feels very strongly about, and that's long before COVID-19. We must act in the best interest of obviously our employees and our stakeholders, but also the wider communities in which we operate. And at Vistatech, we're acutely aware that we have a role to play in flattening the curve, and I think we've taken that responsibility very seriously. I'm happy to say. COVID-19 has hit some, I would say, much harder than others. And I think it's important that companies like Vistatech, who have been mostly resilient, I would say, to COVID,
Yes.
play their part in helping the fight. As I mentioned earlier, it's important to us that our teams can focus on supporting our clients through this.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've been busier than ever producing quick turnaround, critical COVID content for global audiences across the many different industries that we operate in. And we will continue to do whatever it takes to support the organizations that we serve and to aid the global recovery for sure. We have been making financial donations each week to the various charitable organizations across the globe as well to help with the frontline issues. And even this week, actually, we had Easter gifts that we would normally send to staff at this time of the year, and instead we sent them to our local hospital. And you know what, that order may have kept a small independent supplier from closing its doors as well. So every little action matters, they all add up, and I think we all have a role to play, every organisation. It's not just for the front line, for sure.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. That's fantastic. Great to hear. And would you have any advice for individuals or companies who would be unsure about, how to manage their roles or business in the current situation with such uncertainty, and how, taking into consideration how the situation is evolving in some countries, rapidly for the better or the worse sometimes?
Yeah. Well, look, I know in Vistatec we have acknowledged that each position and situation is different from the next. Mm-hmm. And we have been clear with our staff that we know there's no one size fits all in this scenario. Mm-hmm. We know some people are more vulnerable to this disease than others. We know some people are minding children at home and trying to homeschool. We know there are frontline workers in some of our families, which brings significant worries and challenges. And we know as well that we all have different coping mechanisms, and it's very likely these may be compromised, during the lockdown. Mm-hmm. I've advised all of our staff, and I would advise anyone listening to this, to go to your manager, to go to your HR team and talk about the challenges you're having, and a solution will be found. I also think, having some perspective is really important for us all. This is a point in time which will eventually pass, and it's so easy to be consumed by all of the negativity. So I do think that's important advice, to people, just to keep a level of perspective.
Thank you so much. And last question, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience today, whether it's, advice, message, anything out to our audience today who has been listening and who will discover this listening soon?
Well, look, I would like to take the opportunity on behalf of Vistatec to sympathise with all of those who have suffered loss as a result of COVID-19. The loss of life, has been exceptionally cruel, and our sympathies are with so many people. There is significant evidence at this stage to suggest the extreme measures are working. So I would just like to say to people, finally, don't give up now. Keep following the guidelines, stay at home and flatten the curve. And look, that's the quickest path to recovery.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for this positive message, and for sharing all of all this advice and all the actions that Vistatec is taking to help flatten the curve. And thanks for your time, really. So it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today, and we look forward to sharing this interview with our audience very soon. Thanks for spending this time, and that's the end of today's show, unfortunately already, with Siobhan Gantly, who's a Chief Human Resources Officer at Vistatec. So please make sure to tune in again to see or listen to our next VistaTalks show, where we'll be discussing more interesting discussions with interesting people from all around the world.